I see my name in shining lights, yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success, let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. In business, we talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business. And I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. While you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. So let's jump in. I am so thrilled and ecstatic to be joined by JiNan Glasgow George, who has built her career from engineering to patent law and investment by transforming ideas into assets and connecting innovators to the resources they need to make a positive impact. She's the CEO and co-founder of Patent Forecast, a business intelligence software as a service company that provides insights for investors and executives, serial entrepreneurs, and innovators, giving vision ahead of market data using patent data and artificial intelligence. JiNan Glasgow George, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, you are quite well recognized worldwide for your expertise in intellectual property, but I always love to sort of start in the very beginning, which I have always been told is the very best place to start. And I am very curious to learn how you became so passionate about your work. Where did this fire get started?
Wow, I think it all comes from my belief in God. We're all created in God's image and likeness and have power to create things. I think that's what we do as human beings on the planet. And so I'm a recovered engineer. I started as an engineer making things, right? And then went into patent law.
Wow. Awesome. And I know you wrote the book, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, called The IP Miracle, which I'm really curious, those words, the IP miracle, but I love that answer. That's awesome. So I heard a little birdie told me that you were able to predict Fitbit was going to get acquired months before it did using that patent forecasting that I mentioned before. How did that come to be? How did somebody like you, JiNan, know that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I guess Abraham Lincoln said you have to, if you want to predict the future, you have to create it. And maybe Steve Jobs said you have to invent it. Well, it turns out patent data is a leading indicator about what will happen in the market. And when we look at our patent forecast software, we look at patterns of behavior in various areas. And one of the patterns we notice, of course, is who comes in later to the market, but is a big, deep pockets player like Google, like Apple. They tend to acquire companies that have a better patent position and usually coupled with some commercial product, but not always. So our patent forecast data showed that Fitbit had the dominating patent position with the wearables, especially for a trending area of consumer sleep. And Google and Apple, they had only a couple things, only a few assets there. So it seemed like an obvious call, almost a year ahead of the acquisition.
That's wild. And it's funny, just before this interview, I was looking and I saw how Google is utilizing the product. I was just looking at all this very nerdy data, but I guess that's what you do a lot of. Again, I'm chatting with JiNan Glasgow George, the author of The IP Miracle and the expert on intellectual property, as well as patent forecasting. So again, we've started throwing that term around, patent forecasting. So for our small business owners, entrepreneurs that might be tuning in, how can they utilize this platform to make better decisions?
Sure. So again, patent data is a leading indicator. So you might think you know what's happening in your market sector with your competition. But when you begin to look into who's actually invested to create patents there, you get a whole nother level, a different dimension of what's coming into the market. So even small business and entrepreneurs should be looking into their sector of patent data to see who's already filed, who's come before them, and what's coming next in the commercial space. So anybody can do it. Patent data is free, but our patent forecast data makes it really easy to explore what's happening. So you don't have to get geeky or into the weeds of how to run the searches. You can just explore, just sort of like Google Maps, but for patents. Just dive into a neighborhood that you're interested in.
Definitely. Absolutely. And I know you mentioned this a few minutes ago, but you are certainly an inventor, an entrepreneur, patent attorney, as well as a former patent examiner. So that background is giving you that ability to see that intellectual property from that corporate, legal, and government perspectives, which I find fascinating. I know you're a Forbes contributor and, again, author of the new book, The IP Miracle, and you've advised the Senate Small Business Committee and several congressional offices on intellectual property and cryptocurrency. So let's talk about that book, The IP Miracle. Why do you refer to IP as a miracle?
Oh, yeah, of course. Because really the only unlimited resource we have in the world is our ideas, right? But ideas are worth nothing if they stay in your head. So the miracle is getting them out of your head onto paper and transforming them into assets. Usually patents are the most valuable assets of any business. And so that's why I think it's miraculous. We just create assets with words.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. So what's in that book? What can people expect to walk away with that they perhaps didn't know before? How will it better our small business owners and entrepreneurs in their career?
Well, it's the first and only book that's been written for entrepreneurs about intellectual property as business assets. So it's not a treatise on patent law or trademark or copyright, but it's the essential things that you have to know as an inventor, as a small business owner, entrepreneur, even if you're a growing company, even if you've taken on funding in the past and you filed some patents, there's content here that you didn't know about. You just don't know the full story because attorneys are reactive, not proactive. So I share some secrets about how to get the most out of all of your intellectual property in a company and how to inventory it. If you've never done it before, these things are essential. So it's really probably 23 years of law practice in about 15 chapters for entrepreneurs. So not legal mumbo jumbo.
That's awesome. So you mentioned faith a few minutes ago, and I know faith guides your business, guides who you are, and that's where we started in this conversation. One of the things that I've seen quite fascinating from what you've written and spoken about in the past are faith-based business principles. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and how it guides you in your day-to-day work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, as I mentioned, we're all called to create. So I believe exercising that creative power that we have is something that's important and perhaps even a responsibility for everyone. But I also would say every entrepreneur has unwavering faith in their own ideas, right? So there's a faith element, even if you don't believe in God. You have faith in what you imagine, what you envision, you can bring it into reality. And I think in another way, it's about community, the connection that we have with other people. Because while we may have brilliant ideas, even great intellectual property assets, normally you don't do anything on your own. You need investors, you need other collaborators in your business. Maybe it's someone with a different tech background, someone with a finance background. So I think that idea of community is core to my spiritual thinking, but it's important as an entrepreneur.
Definitely. So we are coming close to the end of our conversation over here. I do want to talk about a conference that I believe you just wrapped up called Eclipse that you do every October. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was our 9th annual Eclipse conference, and we bring together a mix of investors, entrepreneurs, executives, and experts, about 120 people. And it's all about that collaboration. We give a spotlight on some entrepreneurs. We present interesting content. We just focused a lot of our discussion on the metaverse, Web3, and NFTs at this conference. But we heard from Silvina Moshidi, who is the founder of the Unicorn Hunters. She was live and in person. Andre Swanston told us about going from $9 in his bank account to 9 figures in exits. So it's an extraordinary day.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, I've got a lot of questions and I can't wait to read the book and I can't wait to get in touch with you. And I know all of our listeners feel the same way. So how can we pick up a copy of the IP Miracle and get in touch with you, JiNan, Glasgow, George?
So you can pick up a copy of the IP Miracle on Amazon or wherever you're shopping for books online, also the audiobook, etc. You can reach me on LinkedIn, JiNan Glasgow George, or find me through my law firm, Neo IP, N-E-O-I-P, and it's neoipassets.com.
neoipassets.com, and the book, once again, is called The IP Miracle. We've talked about faith-based business principles. We've talked about patent forecasting. We've certainly talked about intellectual property, and I've certainly learned a lot in this conversation. I encourage all of our listeners, definitely get in touch with JiNan Glasgow George and pick up a copy of The IP Miracle. We'll link through our website. Speaking of our website, you get a sneak peek of who's going to be on next week on the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You can check out my website, shalomklein.com, or subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast on your favorite podcast app. We've got to squeeze in a quick break here. When we return, we're going to have a lot more small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship for you. So don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Thank you.